I have to say, Michael, your transition is just impeccable.
I mean, it is Transition Virginia, for crying out loud.
We're well practiced by this point.
On this episode of Transition Virginia,
Sometimes going to the bathroom is political.
it's our birthday.
Oh my, how far they have come. This Jackleg podcast.
And to celebrate, we've asked our very first guest to return to the show,
The saga continues.
Whittney Evans of VPM.
It's harder to answer tough questions than it is to lambast journalists for doing their jobs.
We talk about our first year on the air and the 2021 session.
It seems to be like there's a lot of wiggle room.
And we receive some birthday presents.
That's a terrible gift. My apologies.
All that and so much more on this special birthday spectacular episode of Transition Virginia.
Average weight loss 15.4 pounds in first 2 months. For guarantee cancel within first 14 days. Discount with 2 months of auto delivery. Food charged and shipped every 4 weeks. Call or see website for details.
Do you want to lose 18 pounds fast and improve your health? Now you can lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months with Nutrisystem. Get delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, even snacks and shakes delivered safely to your door. All delivered for free. It's easy to follow, and you'll see results in your first week. Just text FOOD to 323232. You'll get your favorite foods made healthier and perfectly balanced to put your body in fat burning mode. Text FOOD to 323232 right now and get 50% off a month of meals and shakes. That's right, 50% off a month of meals and 50% off a month of shakes with probiotics to help support your immune system. Just text FOOD to 323232 right now. There's even a money-back guarantee. Millions of people have lost weight with Nutrisystem, and you can too. Lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months. Just text FOOD to 323232. That's FOOD to 323232.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out.
Welcome to Transition Virginia, the podcast that started documenting the transition of power in Virginia a year ago this week. My name is Michael Pope.
And I'm Thomas Bowman. This week on the podcast, Transition Virginia turns 1 year old.
Happy birthday, Thomas.
Happy birthday, Michael. It's hard to believe, but we actually launched this podcast 1 year ago this week.
You know, I'm really happy that we've got back on the podcast, returning to the podcast 1 year separated from that first episode that we did all those many, many months ago. She is the legal and justice reporter for VPM, and she's also our in-house Pawpaw contributor, Whittney Evans. Welcome back to Transition Virginia.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. And I, just like you, cannot believe it was a year ago, and I thought the world was about as strange as it could get.
You know, it's so great to hear your voice again, Whittney. I really wish we could do this in person, and I'm kind of bummed out that we're not able to hang out in the press room at the Pocahontas building, which is like one of my favorite parts of being in Richmond for the General Assembly session. I really miss hanging out with you and all of your colleagues.
Oh, I can't wait to get the gang back together. I really miss that. GA building is just, it's the press room in particular is so sad. No windows. It's cold, but you know, despite the stress of being there and covering the GA, we all really enjoy each other's company. And I miss doing things like, you know, working to lo-fi hip hop with Mallory No Pain and grabbing a beer after work. So nice. And I can't wait to get back to that.
Okay, so it's not really a birthday party unless we have the traditional song. So we have a special Transition Virginia performance from one of our good friends.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Transition VA podcast. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, very nice.
And the Grammy goes to Sarah Graham Taylor. Wow, I cannot believe that she is such a talented singer. That's crazy.
A woman of many talents.
She is a woman of many talents. In her day job, she is the legislative director and lobbyist for the city of Alexandria, and also apparently a talented and amazing singer.
So lovely.
She also sent this birthday greeting for our podcast.
Happy birthday, Transition VA podcast. May your birthday be more special than the most special session. May there be no sunset provision on your birthday celebration. And may your birthday be so special, it needs a 2/3 vote to pass out of the General Assembly. Congratulations and happy birthday, y'all.
I love it.
She's really contributed a lot to the energy of this podcast over the year.
She has, and she's explained stuff. You know, I go back when I'm editing the sound for this podcast, I have to listen to it over and over and over again. And Sarah is one of those rare guests where when you listen to it the second and third time, you learn more stuff that you didn't get the first time you heard it. So I'm glad that we've been able to talk her into being a regular contributor on the show. And she's really helped me understand this session that we're in now, which is kind of mind-boggling in its scope and its scale. The new Democratic majority is now doing stuff in their second year in power that they did not do their first year. And wow, are they pushing a whole lot of stuff through the fire hose here. Just this year alone, we've got abolishing the death penalty and legalizing marijuana. Thomas, I'm curious. I'm going to ask you about the strategy there. So why didn't Democrats do that their first year in power? Is there a reason that they put that stuff on hold for their second year in power? Why didn't we see this last year?
Well, you know, their first year in power, you're talking about some heavy policy lifts, especially with marijuana legalization. And you had a lot of pent-up reforms from 27 years, at least in the House, out of power. Their first time in a very long time since having a trifecta. They finally get to do all the things they want to do, but then they only had 90 days to do it. So they had to decide what they could do right away and what they had to come back, debate on, figure out as a caucus and do in year two. And so that's what we're seeing as the fruit of that strategy.
So you mentioned the heavy policy lift with the marijuana. There's so much going on there. You know, they've got to create a new agency to regulate this thing, and they've got to figure out how to expunge the old convictions. And they're going to bring in like $183 million of new revenue. So they got to figure out where they want to put that revenue. I was curious that there is bipartisan support here, but it's not in both houses. So it was actually a party line vote in favor of legalization in the House, but it was bipartisan in the Senate with Senator Donovan and Senator Vogel. Whitney, what do you think of the politics here of marijuana legalization?
I mean, I definitely think that I would imagine that Republicans are, you know, glomming on to the idea of bringing in new revenue. Obviously, that's a big plus for marijuana legalization, but they're also dealing with the idea of, you know, years and years and years of tough on crime, and they still support, most Republicans in the Virginia General Assembly still support sort of the tough on crime laws that were left over from, you know, like the 80s and 90s. And I think it's hard to sort of pair that with moving Virginia in this direction that states across the country are moving, and sort of looking at marijuana like it's a new sort of business venture. So I can definitely see how Republicans would have a little bit of a split mindset about legalization.
You know, it's interesting that what we're seeing with the death penalty is the sort of inverse with marijuana legalization in terms of the bipartisan nature. So in marijuana legalization, it was party line vote in the House, but then it was bipartisan in the Senate. It was the opposite with the death penalty. So it was a party line vote in the Senate with all of the Republicans voting against abolishing the death penalty. But then in the House, it was actually bipartisan. You saw 3 House Republicans vote in favor of abolishing the death penalty. Thomas, what do you make of the strategy there? Like, what's happening with the politics of the death penalty versus marijuana? Like, why aren't those two issues aligned? Is there something about those two issues that separates them?
Well, when you look at it from a cultural point of view, a lot of these Republicans represent areas that consider themselves very strong in their faith. So while they may not necessarily believe marijuana should or shouldn't be legalized, they can definitely get behind outlawing the state killing of a prisoner. I think it's that particular policy is something that aligns closely with many people's faiths, especially the ones that they represent. marijuana is more of, frankly, a regulatory conversation. You've got a huge crowd of people more comfortable with marijuana. And frankly, I think rural Virginia especially could benefit from new cultivation business opportunities. But, when it comes to something that has been impugned morally in the same circles where that make the death penalty something a little easier to repeal, I think that explains a lot of the policy outcome on what could cut through the bipartisan line and what could not.
I think it's important to note, though, that the Senate almost had bipartisan support for the death penalty. Senator Stanley was actually co-sponsoring this legislation, but in the end, he couldn't get behind the bill because he couldn't agree that folks who might otherwise have been on death row in Virginia would have a potential opportunity for parole somewhere down the road. So I know that was a contention, but it just kind of tells you how fragile these sort of like bipartisan discussions are.
Yeah, Senator Stanley had an amendment that was rejected that sort of guaranteed that people would serve life in prison and not be eligible for parole. And so he essentially took a walk. It's not that he voted to keep the death penalty or voted against abolishing the death penalty. He just didn't vote. And it's weird. I've seen a lot of that this session where, especially on the Republican side, a lot of the Republican senators just take a walk and stuff instead of voting for things one way or the other. And I have to wonder about the strategy there. What do we make of Republicans taking a walk on stuff instead of voting on it?
Well, in the House, it's an election year. So that doesn't explain all the senators unless the senators have other ambitions. But abolishing the death penalty, marijuana laws, reform laws, many other things that House Dems are pushing are wildly popular. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of a 60-40 vote, especially things that are still popular in your own districts.
I'm kind of wondering why. Also, what is the difference between abstentions and not voting? Does anybody know the answer to that? Because I'm seeing.
Are you talking about like when they vote the yellow button that's Rule 20 or whatever that
Rule
is?
69.
There's a number of rules. Rule 69.
I just noticed with the death penalty vote in the House that it says 0 abstentions, but 2 did not vote, including Delegate McQuinn, which I'm curious about.
That can be a lot of things. You definitely need to check in with McQuinn's office for the specifics, but that could be practically anything. Either the delegate wasn't there and therefore missed the vote or had to step out, go to the bathroom, or was there and didn't hear the vote. Is sometimes like it happens because of how quickly they move.
I'm always so curious about whether these things are some sort of political move or it's simply that they went to the bathroom.
Well, sometimes going to the bathroom is political. But and Rule 69 is supposed to be used when an individual legislator has a financial interest in the bill they're discussing, one way or the other. So the interpretations can be subject to change based off the speaker or the clerk or the Senate president. But generally speaking, it's supposed to be used when they've got financial interest in the bill.
So yeah, in the Senate, that's Rule 36, and it's the yellow button as opposed to just not voting. And I have to say, because they're doing it virtually this year, it's more awkward to have the virtual people not voting, because what happens is, everybody votes and they press the button, and then if you're in the room and you want to take a walk, it's just easy because you're not there and you don't press the button, and the clerk knows that you have intentionally not pressed the button or that you're just not there. But when you do it virtually, you have to call on Senator so-and-so, how do you vote? And then there's just this long, awkward silence to indicate that they're not voting.
Sorry, so-and-so's not here right now.
Can I take a message? Right. So, we've ended up meeting a lot of people on this podcast, and we've made some really amazing friends, many of whom are super fans. One of our earliest supporters and our biggest super fan is Adam Paley, and he sent us this birthday greeting.
When Democrats gained control of the legislature in addition to the governorship, I knew this would be an exciting time to follow Virginia politics, and this podcast came into being at the perfect moment. Thank you for being an invaluable source of news, information, and entertainment. Happy birthday, Transition Virginia. Wishing you continued success and a set of life jackets to keep up with the rising blue tide.
That's very nice of Adam. Thank you, Adam, for that message.
Thank you for sending us a message, and thank you for being our number one super fan. So, in terms of the blue tide and the life jackets, one of the things the new Democratic majority has been trying to do is unwind all of these get tough on crime Democrats from the 1990s. So that's all what's being sort of undone now, is the new Democratic majority is sort of undoing the old Democratic majority.
Right. That's so interesting. And we've learned, I guess, over the years since we left this sort of tough on crime era, that these mandatory minimum sentences are sort of just keeping people in the system for longer than maybe necessary. And it's even forcing people to, admit to crimes that they didn't commit so that they could get plea deals. We've just learned so much about criminal justice in that time. But Republicans are still, sort of holding tight to these like vestiges of the tough on crime era. And for some reason, they're really stuck on getting rid of the mandatory minimum for DUIs, for instance. There are just certain crimes that they're just, set on believing minimum sentences deter those crimes.
Or the assault on police officers. That's another one that we've seen a whole lot of discussion. There's this mandatory minimum for assaulting a police officer, and you've seen so much lobbying here from the state police and the chiefs of police and the Sheriff's Association, and they're just bitterly opposed to getting rid of this mandatory minimum. And I have to say, from a messaging standpoint, it's actually they can frame it as, well, if you don't want the mandatory minimum, then that means you're going to let those people go and there will be no punishment for assaulting a law enforcement officer, which is not, of course, how it happens. Like you still get charged with it and you still get sentenced for it. And it really depends on the circumstances of the case. But they can make that argument.
Right. And I think the other argument is, clearly this does not absolve people of accountability, but it does allow judges to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is using their judgment to decide how long someone should spend in jail or prison, or if they should be in jail or prison at all. And I think that the major argument here is that, it makes the system more personalized.
It's interesting to point out that in undergrad, at least in the early 2000s, I was taught that nobody earns political points for being soft on crime. And so what you see here is a counterexample to, good old-fashioned book learning. And the question is, do Democrats get rewarded for being soft on crime, or does something happen, or are Republicans able to successfully gin up fear and angst about this move to reduce penalties, get rid of mandatory minimums, and the death penalty? Pointing to the Willie Horton ad that Bush ran, it's burned Democrats in the past, and it will be interesting to see how the public reacts in the present.
I think the public has just really moved forward on this issue in such a big way. I can't imagine that Democrats will be hurt by this at this point.
I would strongly expect the Republicans to use this on the campaign trail in their campaign for governor and in House races. They think they might win back some of the seats the Democrats took for them over the last two election cycles. I would be willing to bet this is at the top of their list of things to campaign on, is those Democrats are soft on crime, and they got rid of the death penalty, and they got rid of all these mandatory minimums, and they want you to be able to assault a law enforcement officer without consequences. And I think that we're definitely going to see them try to campaign on that issue. Will they be successful? I don't know.
I just think they're going to keep playing to their, by talking about this issue, they're going to keep playing to their own base. I just think that Democrats have just moved so far on this issue.
Well, speaking of needing to get tough on crime, let's talk about our favorite Republican friend, or one of our favorite Republican friends, Richard Krause.
It is easier to make a camel jump a ditch than to make a fool listen to this jackleg podcast. It's hard to believe that Transition Virginia has been on the air for a year. Oh my, how far they have come. This jackleg podcast But I will leave them with this, and I will bless them with may the fleas of 1,000 camels nest in their armpits.
Okay.
Where do we go with that?
Wow. Well, actually, that was a very nice compliment coming from Kraus. Thank you. Thank you.
Do camels even live in Virginia? I mean,
they've got a zoo down there, right?
You know, it's funny up here in Northern Virginia, if you go to the Mount Vernon estate at Christmas time, they have a camel that is there every year. It's their sort of Christmas tradition because apparently George Washington loved exotic animals and he would bring a camel to Mount Vernon at Christmas time. So they sort of continue that by bringing a camel there. But that's the only relationship between camels and Virginia that I'm aware of. Usually it's more horses, you know, Virginia's horse country. And of course, there in Richmond, you've got lots of statues of people on horses. You see where I'm going with my segue,
Nice
ladies and gentlemen.
Nicely done. Slick, Michael. Slick.
Whitney, talk about what's happening with everybody's least favorite equestrian statue of Robert E. Lee there on Monument Avenue in Richmond.
Oh, the ongoing saga of Lee Monument. I don't know how many times NPR has called. NPR loves this story. I'll tell you what, people all over the country love this story. And NPR keeps calling me to go on the air to talk about, you know, the latest developments in the Lee Monument. And every time they're sorely disappointed when I tell them, you know, all of this happened today. I sat through this hearing. So-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. But we have to wait for this filing or another decision, or we have to wait for what's happening right now is we're waiting to hear back from the Virginia Supreme Court about whether or not they'll take up an appeal. A lower court already said that Virginia has essentially won the case, that Virginia has the right to take down the Lee Monument, but the opponents of taking it down are trying to ask the Supreme Court to take it up. So at this point, it's, you know, in this continued state of limbo. And, you know, meanwhile, they've got fences up all around the statue so that they can prepare for taking it down. So the saga continues.
You know, I've got to say, its current condition is a huge upgrade over what used to be there. And the physical evidence for that is never once did I get out of my car and actually go look at the monument until it got graffitied. And then it was actually like a piece of art.
I totally agree. You know, I haven't been in Richmond, of course, during the pandemic, but just sort of seeing the photos of it, I love the way it looks now. I mean, it's sort of countercultural, of course. It doesn't quite fit into the grand theme of Monument Avenue, but I think it looks really cool with all the graffiti all over it.
It's such an interesting symbol. And I kind of can't wait for like 20, 30 years in the future where we can look back at these photos and look back at, you know, I mean, there's just so many powerful images floating all over the place and like artwork that stemmed from, you know, what's happened with the monument, just the photos. I honestly just can't wait to be looking back on all of this and remember how powerful it all was.
I too would like to put as much distance myself between me and the Trump era. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of our other favorite podcasts that launched this year.
Hey, you. Yes, you. You're listening to Transition Virginia right now, and you're probably a fan of the podcast, right? Well, then rate and review, like Trevor Sutherland.
1 star. The only time I listen is when I'm on.
That's not really what I was thinking. Well, how about this review from Richard Krause?
This piece of shit podcast, I wouldn't even rate 1 star.
Come on, listeners. I know you can do better than that. Hit the pause button right now and give us a quick review. And we're back on Transition Virginia. We're talking about our 1 year anniversary. Yes, we are 1 year old. 1 year old this week. You know, we weren't the only people to have this thought about doing a podcast because of the new Democratic majority. Right as we launched, we had competition. Nathan Moore, the host of the Bold Dominion podcast out in Charlottesville, sent us this birthday greeting.
For this auspicious occasion, I wanted to give you a gift, a virtual gift. And I had to look up what the gifts are for first anniversaries, but I guess traditionally it would be paper. and the modern take is clock. And so I'm going to give you the clock on the bottom right of your computer screen. That's my gift to you, and you can use that to keep your timing under control while you're recording. That's a terrible gift. My apologies. But happy birthday nonetheless, and look forward to lots more episodes from Transition Virginia.
I can tell he's a Windows user.
Not a Mac guy.
No, but sick burn, and I'm glad our fans have longer attention spans.
Speaking of Bold Dominion, we also have this birthday greeting from Bold Dominion producer Aryan Baloo.
Thomas and Michael, you guys do such a great show. I mean, I don't want to get too sentimental, but I'm really not ashamed to say that I think Transition Virginia is in my top 2 podcasts about Virginia state politics that was created in the last 13 months. So keep up the great work, guys.
Top 2. We made the top 2.
Hey, you know what? They're in ours.
Yes. Aryan, you're also in our top 2. You know, they have figured out a way to make this podcast happen despite the pandemic. We have struggled with making this happen. You know, our early episodes, of course, we were hearkening back to our earlier episode where we were all in the same room, and gosh, wasn't that fun? And it was more of a happy hour vibe back then. Mm-hmm. Now we've got to do it through all these machines, and it's just not as much fun, of course, but we're making it work. And I mean, that's life in the pandemic, right?
There was a time when we thought this would only be the case for, maybe 3-5 episodes.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty amazing that, it has lasted this long. And it's also pretty amazing that you guys have made it work and you've still made the podcast interesting, and you still have convinced me to come along and take this crazy ride with you.
You know, Whitney, I know that you have done lots of reporting on the influence the pandemic has had behind bars. What's going on in prisons and jails in Virginia? How are they dealing with the pandemic?
It seems that they haven't been doing that well with the pandemic. And I think, from the get-go, all the way back to the very beginning of the pandemic, everyone knew that these places, these congregate settings were going to be a hotbed. It was going to hurt a lot of people who are incarcerated. And in fact, it did. A lot of people have gotten sick. A lot of people have died, including people who are incarcerated and the people who go to work every day and work in these settings. It was so expected. And I think it was probably not managed in the best way that it could have been. And not only that, but it's so hard to find out what exactly is happening inside of these places. And that's it's made it so difficult for reporters to get this information. You can talk to people who are on the inside, and they'll give you their perspective and tell you how they're feeling. And then you go to the Department of Corrections or you go to the jail, and, they give you these very vague answers about what they're actually doing inside. Meanwhile, you're watching the numbers go up, and you're watching how many people have died in Virginia who are in prisons and jails. And it sucks. It really sucks.
And then there's all this pushback about inmates getting the vaccine, right? I mean, when any state gets the stockpile of vaccine, they need to figure out, we give it to this group first, we give it to this group second, we give it to this group third. And, when that model came out, when those planning documents came out, there was a lot of pushback to inmates getting the vaccine so early before lots of other groups, right?
Yeah, it had a lot of, I think it just had so many political implications for the governor in particular. Just the idea of putting people who are in prison and jail before other people in the community, that's a tough call for someone in a political sense. I think that's a tough call. But it also made so much sense. These people were at such a high risk. And not only that, but even though it seems like they're in sort of this insulated environment, like I said, people go in and out of those buildings every day, people who work there, and it does get spread into the community. So it was a huge public health issue. But I can see how it would be so difficult on its face to say these people should get the vaccine before these other groups of people.
Well, and one thing we learned is that high density is high risk, right? So just like we prioritize nursing homes, hospitals, other places where human beings are packed in tight, we would need to prioritize jails because not all crimes are death sentences, right? In fact, no crimes are about to be death sentences.
Exactly. But I mean, it's just the stigma around what it means to be an incarcerated person in this country and to be someone convicted of a crime is enough for some people to say these people do not deserve to be vaccinated for a deadly virus over other people in the community.
You know, one of the best things about recording Transition Virginia remotely is that we've been able to record with friends all over the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that includes a new friend we made this year, co-host of the brand new podcast, Matt Colt Hall.
We just appreciate all that you do to make our Commonwealth a better place. And so congratulations, Transition Virginia, on your first birthday. I can't wait to be back on the podcast. I listen to every episode, and I can't wait to come back on and talk about my favorite thing, which is Virginia Republican politics. Oh, and we can talk a little country music and bourbon too. Happy birthday, Transition Virginia.
He loves Dolly Parton. He will talk endlessly about Dolly Parton.
Hi.
But, you know, it's interesting. So the Republican politics are fascinating now, especially in the post-Trump era. But you know what else is fascinating? Divisions inside of the Democratic Party. It is so interesting to me watching all the divisions that have played out since the Democrats have taken power. And you see a lot of conflict that was sort of either not apparent or hidden when they were in the minority. And perhaps one of the most interesting conflicts from my perspective is this debate over expungement. We've seen the House Democrats take a very different approach from the Senate Democrats in terms of expunging old convictions. The House is insisting on an automatic model where after 8 years, if you have an old conviction for like drug possession or littering or larceny, it will automatically be expunged after 8 years. Now, on the Senate side, they take a totally different approach where they're really pushing for a petition-based model where you don't have to hire a lawyer, but you'd be really silly not to. You have to hire a lawyer, you have to miss a day of work, you have to go before a judge, you have to explain what's going on. And so the Senate Democrats really want you to go through this petition-based model to get rid of that old drug possession charge that you want to get rid of, or they want you to go to a court to get rid of this old larceny conviction. Whittney, I know that you've done some reporting on this. What do you make of these divisions here inside the Democratic Party between the House Democrats that are pushing for this automatic model versus the Senate Democrats that want this petition-based model?
Oh, this has been so interesting to watch. These divisions it can be so apparent, especially when they're arguing in hearings and you've got Senator Morrissey sort of arguing with Senator Surville. Morrissey is saying, your proposal is way too complicated. No one's going to be able to understand this. And Surville's, he's got this whole, you can't handle the truth moment, where he says, well, life is complicated. And oversimplification is, what gave us mandatory minimums.
Yeah, he quoted H.L. Mencken on that. Yeah, he had a really funny H.L. Mencken quote that he used.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's so interesting. From the get-go, it was the last session before the special session where, it was a priority for Democrats to address expungement, especially for the majority leader. And they just had they kept running into the same problems that they ran into this year, is whether it should be automatic or whether it should be petition-based, and then what crimes actually qualify. And I personally think that the actual list of crimes was really hard to get. I don't know if you ran into this problem, Michael, but I almost felt like they didn't want to put the actual list of crimes. They didn't want to advertise the list of crimes. And I think Senator Morrissey said something about this. Once people see, a crime that looks really bad listed on what's eligible for expungement, then there's going to be tons of pushback. And so I think that there was little hesitancy.
Whittney, on that issue, yes, it took me some time to dig into this issue, but the list, here's the list that's in my notebook in terms, and this is not a complete list or an exhaustive list, but it's just things to think about that would be automatically expunged under the House model, but not under the Senate model. So we're talking about things like larceny, trespassing, disorderly conduct, littering, you would need to, so if you have a conviction for littering under the House model, it would be automatically expunged. Under the Senate model, you would need to get a petition. But I think the most instructive crime that you really need to think about to understand this issue is drug possession. And I think that's actually kind of the logic behind doing the automatic model. Is if you've got and also for the purpose of this discussion, we should probably take marijuana totally off the table because that's a separate bill and they're working on that separately. So if you've got an old marijuana conviction, it will eventually be automatically expunged. So we're actually really talking about if you've got a possession charge for cocaine, or if you have a possession charge for heroin, or a possession charge for PCP, under the House model, all of those would automatically go away after 8 years, assuming that you paid your debt to society and you didn't have any further charges or that sort of thing. That those old drug convictions would go away automatically. Whereas under the Senate model, they want you to go before a judge and make sure that you're pulling your life together. And a lot of times what happens with these drug crimes is that what you're actually convicted of is not necessarily what you've done because of how the pleading process works. Right. And so what they really want to do is, it's like if you've got a charge for larceny on your record, you actually might have a drug problem and you ended up with a larceny charge. And so the Senate model, what they really want to do is get you before a judge and get a sense of what's happening in your life. Another really interesting thing here is both sides are really digging in their heels, and they do not want to compromise on this issue. They didn't want to compromise last year during the General Assembly session. They didn't want to compromise over the summer and fall with their lengthy special session, and they don't want to compromise now. So this is going to head into a conference committee, and that conference committee is going to be epic. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to figure out some kind of compromise, or they're going to walk away without doing anything on this issue yet again.
They're digging in their heels for a reason. I mean, automatic expungement is a really expensive undertaking. And I don't know if you've dealt with court systems in Virginia, but it's pretty antiquated. They're going to have to do some serious technological upgrades to do this automatic stuff. And Serval is saying that it's just really not practical. But at the same time, you've got these national experts that are saying people don't take advantage of expungement whenever they have to go to court and, go through this whole legal process again. Not enough people can benefit from expungement. So to have the biggest impact, it needs to be automatic.
It also strikes me that the one-time technology upgrade and the costs associated with it would dwarf the cost savings in dockets, attorney's fees, court costs, all of the above, because it's easier to pull somebody off an automatic list than it is to create an automatic list in the first place, right? So do the thing that's a little harder. And then if there's somebody that we still think needs to go before a judge, right? It seems to be like there's a lot of wiggle room. If you go from 100 and maybe not quite 100, like what the Senate is offering, or like expedited drug courts with drug-only dockets, to just keep it off the main dockets, which the same senators complain about those dockets being too long. Mm-hmm. It strikes me that there's an obvious give and take here.
On the issue of financial impact, we can't do this podcast without support from you. And, our birthday is a good reason to think about contributing to Transition Virginia podcast. It's really easy to become a Patreon. You just go to the website, transitionvirginia.com, and click on the little button that says contribute on Patreon. In fact, a friend of our podcast, Trevor Sutherland, sent us this birthday message pledging his support on Patreon. Although, it's funny with this, when you listen to this audio, I think we might have caught him in a hot mic moment. Take a listen to this birthday greeting from Trevor Sutherland.
I'm going to be signing up as a $3 monthly subscriber to support your work, and I hope others will join me and do the same. All right, that's all I have to say. $3 a month, and they'll start having me as a guest on the show again. What, $10 a month? Jesus Christ, that's extortion.
I have to say, Michael, your transition is just impeccable.
I mean, it is Transition Virginia, for crying out loud.
We're well practiced by this point.
Trevor Sutherland has been one of my favorite guests because he has a sense of humor, as we heard from that soundbite there. And I love when he and David Ramadan are on together because they can disagree with each other without being sort of mean and confrontational. And I find that pair to be really exciting.
You know, they also frequently got into bets over the ultimate outcome of things on ballots, like redistricting. So that was fun to watch them both very confidently make their bets and then lose. With that, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to enjoy the circus.
Average weight loss 15.4 pounds in first 2 months. For guarantee cancel within first 14 days. Discount with 2 months of auto delivery. Food charged and shipped every 4 weeks. Call or see website for details.
Do you want to lose 18 pounds fast and improve your health? Now you can lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months with Nutrisystem. Get delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, even snacks and shakes delivered safely to your door. All delivered for free. It's easy to follow, and you'll see results in your first week. Just text FOOD to 323232. You'll get your favorite foods made healthier and perfectly balanced to put your body in fat burning mode. Text FOOD to 323232 right now and get 50% off a month of meals and shakes. That's right, 50% off a month of meals and 50% off a month of shakes with probiotics to help support your immune system. Just text FOOD to 323232 right now. There's even a money-back guarantee. Millions of people have lost weight with Nutrisystem, and you can too. Lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months. Just text FOOD to 323232. That's FOOD to 323232.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out.
And I'll tell you what doesn't help is when we have reporters like Michael Pope from WVTF. These were not rioters and looters. These were patriots. I never called the people who stormed the Capitol patriots. These were not rioters and looters. These were patriots. I never called the people who stormed the Capitol patriots. We have to hold our media accountable.
You can help our podcast hold people in power accountable. Head over to transitionvirginia.com and hit the button that says Contribute on Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us speak truth to power. And we're back on Transition Virginia. We're celebrating our first anniversary, our first birthday, and we're hearing from some of our friends and from some of our supporters. Now, one of our friends who sent us this birthday greeting is also one of our Patreon supporters, Harrison Roday. He sent us this birthday greeting.
Michael and Thomas, happy birthday to the show. I have 2 gifts for Michael, a shrink ray and a twin-size cot, so he can now at least sleep comfortably while living rent-free in Senator Chase's head.
Oh, so many layers to that.
Yeah, complex man. You know, there's something about Michael that gets under Senator Chase's skin.
Oh, yeah. I love this beef. And I just want to get out the popcorn when we talk about Amanda Chase.
You know, when she was on the podcast, Michael drove her crazy.
You know, I often interview candidates when they're running for office, and one of the things that I do is I listen very carefully and I ask follow-up questions. And the reason for that is because I'm usually trying to dig for certain kinds of answers. And so when we had her on the podcast, we started with the obvious question, which is, why are you running? So her answer to why are you running for governor was because the Democrats are trying to take us off the cliff to socialism. And then she went on and said some other things. So later in the interview, I circled back around because this is her key reason. This is the first thing out of her mouth when I asked her why she was running for governor is the Democrats and cliff to socialism. So I said, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Give us an example of how the Democrats are taking us off the cliff to socialism. And she started talking about things that had nothing to do with socialism. So I asked her the same question again a second time. And she didn't really answer the question. She talked about other things. So the first time I asked her the question, she talked about driver privilege cards for undocumented drivers, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with socialism. And so I asked her the question again. And the second time she talked about recent changes to voting, which again seems to have nothing to do with socialism. And so there was a third time I came back around and I said, okay, I just want to make sure that I've got, an answer here. Like when you say cliff to socialism, what exactly are you talking about? And it led to an exchange that was kind of tense and awkward, and we ended up editing it out of the podcast because I thought it was distracting. She eventually did sort of answer the question, and so if you listen to the version of the podcast that we posted, you hear me ask this question about cliff to socialism a third time, and then you hear her answer, and then we abruptly end the podcast because things got so tense and awkward, which you'll hear in this sound clip. So this is when I asked her this question for the third time about cliff to socialism.
This has never been heard before, Whitney. You are the first person outside of me and Michael, and I guess Senator Chase, to hear this audio.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so when I asked her this question about cliff to socialism a third time, this is how she responded.
I'd like to, if it's possible, Senator, go back to this comment that you made earlier about cliff to socialism. So is the driver privilege card for undocumented drivers socialism? Is recent changes to voting and how voting happens, is that socialism? I'm just trying to sort of put my finger on what exactly is socialist about what Democrats have been doing recently in the General Assembly.
Okay, I'm going to say this. First of all, who are you all with again?
It's a podcast, Transition Virginia podcast. I was just, you had mentioned off the cliff to socialism. I just want to put my finger on exactly what you're.
Let me just cut to the chase here. I feel like that what you're trying to do is create some type of podcast which is going to be used against me in my race for governor. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I feel like that this is not really an informative type session. This is something that, and look, I'm not stupid. I'm not naive to what is going on here, and I'm done with the interview. I am not going to be. I'm not going to be the victim of what you guys are trying to do. I'm done.
We don't want. I appreciate what you're saying, and we do not. We're not making you a victim, and I really.
Yeah. So what happens is, let's just talk about this. You know what really gets to me is when people are disingenuous about their intentions for interviews. When I have typical interviews with people with podcasts, and I do them each and every day. It's not interrogation. It's not assuming that their position is correct. It's more to listen and find out where I stand on policy issues.
Well, that's what I was trying to do.
Like
well,
no. I'm talking. It's my turn. Thank you. This is a session, I believe, which, I feel like this is a setup and a trap that you all want to use, whether it's the Republican elitists that want to use this, or maybe it's the liberals, the Democrat, whatever. I'm not going to be your pawn. Sorry.
Not the first time I've been accused of interrogating people. So we ended up pulling that out of the podcast, and we did not use it in our Amanda Chase episode because I thought, and I still think, it probably would have been distracting because she eventually did have an answer, which was that the CARES Act paid people a subsidy, which was more than they might make in their job. So that was the answer that you'll hear in the podcast, and you don't hear that tense back and forth that we had. Later, of course, the Senate moved to censure her, and I went on the radio and talked about one of the reasons why was that she called the people who invaded the Capitol that they weren't rioters and looters, that they were patriots. She did not like that, so she went on Twitter and called for me to resign. Breaking news, I'm not going to resign. And then she went on the Senate floor and denounced me on the Senate floor, which was special. That's never happened before to me. And, what do we make of all of this drama around this one senator and how much oxygen it's sucked out of the atmosphere this year?
Yeah, I think this year has taught journalists a lot about having to decide how much oxygen to give some people. The controversy around Chase is always a spectacle, but at some point, it just becomes a sideshow. And like you said, it's not really helpful, especially when we're simply doing our jobs and we're trying to get to the heart of these policy differences. And it doesn't do any of us justice to focus on the circus.
It is interesting. It feels like every year there is a different circus. I'm sure everyone will remember back in 2019, there was the blackface circus. And it does feel like every year there's the big shiny object that distracts from the policy debate. I mean, like this thing with this one senator being censured doesn't affect anybody's lives. I mean, it is sort of interesting and there's drama associated with it and it's a human story, but it doesn't change anybody's criminal record or ability to get a job or ability to get health care. It's sort of nutrition free, it's junk food essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people who it does impact are so close to the problem. Either you're a journalist or you're a politician, but it doesn't really impact people outside of the General Assembly. And I tend to I really don't like, putting too much energy into those types of issues.
What's fascinating here is we see the roots of Senator Chase's enmity toward Michael Pope here, right? Literally had to ask her 3 times, just what do you mean by cliff to socialism? What is the cliff? Like, clearly a talking point, not something that she actually believed, or else it would be a lot easier to answer.
And by the way, I said earlier, I'm accused of interrogating people often. It's for this very reason, because people have a soundbite and they'll say things like, I've interviewed dozens and dozens of candidates in my years as a journalist. And so usually what happens, especially with first-time candidates, they'll have what they think is the soundbite, which will be, I'm running something along the lines of, I'm running to remove waste and fraud from government. And so I'll say, so my follow-up question to that would be, okay, well, give me a couple examples of waste and fraud. And I've never actually interviewed a candidate who could give me some examples. I think there might have been 1 or 2 times. But most of the time when people say stuff like that, they can't back it up. And so this is sort of the reason why I listen very carefully. And I'm always trying to get at, why are you running? If you're elected, what do you hope to accomplish? Like, let's actually think about this and take it seriously. And that's what I was trying to do with Senator Chase in our interview. And we got some pushback on this because some of our listeners said, well, you should have gone after her and you should have called her a liar. And you should have said that what she said about COVID is not right. And you should have called her out for lying about this or lying about that. And there clearly is room in the journalism sphere for that. And there's nothing wrong with taking that tact. What I was trying to do was a little bit different, is I was trying to take her seriously. Okay, so Senator Chase, if you become Governor Chase, like, walk us through exactly what a Governor Chase would do. And like, let's really take seriously your reason for running, which is not taking us off the cliff to socialism. Give me some examples of that. And so that's what I was trying to do, is like take her seriously and get actual answers. And like I said earlier, she actually did have an answer to that. It took me a while to get there, but she eventually did answer the question, which is what you hear on the podcast.
I think it betrays too that, like, asking a question 3 times, you melt down and then you attack the reporter who did it, betrays the weakness of her strategy. And I don't think Amanda Chase is alone. It's a personality type in a lot of ways, but they can't answer why they think what they think. They scramble for, you heard a bunch of conspiracy theories, some liberal agenda, something to hurt her in her campaign. That was the first tool in her arsenal. And then undermining the media when she is very clearly documented saying whatever she says and doing the things that she does. What you've got here is somebody who can't hold up under questioning.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so easy for people to, it's such, low hanging fruit for people to just go after the messenger. And I know it's easy for me to say, or Michael to say, because we are both journalists, but it's harder to answer tough questions than it is to lambast journalists for doing their jobs.
I didn't even think of this as a particularly tough question, because this was her reason for running.
Right.
I mean, you would think that it would be sort of fully fleshed out and you would be conversational. So in my mind, I didn't even really think about it as being a particularly difficult question. But I was frustrated that I wasn't getting an answer to it.
Michael and Whitney, I'd be interested to know, as journalists, when Amanda Chase has her meltdown, often it's for like dramatic effect and she's playing to the cameras or she's playing to, people at home. And this, of course, had an editorial decision where we were able to not show that. So how did journalists take candidates like Amanda Chase, because she's not the only one? And how do you report on the things that those candidates say and do, especially when they're willing to lie about it, in a way that maintains the integrity of the truth?
Well, actually, this is something that I've confronted many times because, I said earlier, this is not the first time I've been accused of interrogating people. And so over the course of my career, I've interviewed a lot of like school board candidates or city council candidates or, that sort of thing. And people will say things like, well, I'm running to remove waste, fraud, and abuse from, our government. And then I'll have it like a half-hour phone conversation with someone where I will ask them the same question 5, 6, 7 times, and they don't have an answer. And so what you'll end up seeing in print is candidate so-and-so says she wants to run for office to remove waste, fraud, and abuse from government, but could not name a example of waste, fraud, or abuse, or something along those lines, right? So that's one sentence that is, in reality, it's me asking the same question 7 or 8 times and them getting frustrated with me and hanging up the phone and thinking that I've interrogated them. But from the reader's perspective, it's only one sentence.
Right. I think that's the most reasonable and straightforward way to deal with it. If you point out in some way, even if it's just a quick sentence, that, by the way, I did ask this follow-up question, just so you know, and they couldn't answer this question. That's, a very easy way to provide some context. Or you can come out of the quote with the actual facts of the issue and point out that, this person claims this particular fact, and actually I've checked that out and it's incorrect. So I think there are a couple of different ways to deal with that issue.
All right. Well, that is all for this episode. If you've got comments or questions about what you just heard, or maybe you only want to tell us what you think about the show, write an email and send it to us at transitionvapodcast@gmail.com, and we might read it on the air. Subscribe to Transition Virginia anywhere pods are cast. Follow the Transition team on Twitter @TransitionVA, and find us on the web at transitionvirginia.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can enjoy our next episode of Transition Virginia.